this talk. So, and I'll post this online as well, later tonight or tomorrow. So if we get into question and answer, you'll have tonight's version of this talk. All right, so a little bit about me. All this resolution is a little bit different. I'm Little Lloyd on Twitter and a couple other places. I'm currently going through a little bit of a rebranding. I had been Lloyd Cledwin for years. If you want more details, we'll talk about that later. Here's my intro slide that always makes me chuckle a little bit. So I work for, how do I hide? That makes that a little better. My primary day job is working for McAllister, which is a nonprofit. McAllister College is a nonprofit institution. And I work on the fundraising side. So I work on the for-profit side of a nonprofit. I do a ton of volunteer work for the largest for-profit, one of the largest for-profit organizations in the world. And then I also teach. I've taught for years at the University of St. Thomas in their graduate programs in software, where I have my software engineering master's from teaching web programming. So that's just a little bit about me. Tonight, I'm going to talk about the real-time backend for the web. And now it's more than just that. It's a bajillion the other things. But I'm going to focus tonight really on one of the core kind of products and tools that Firebase offered and kind of brought to developers that all of these other tools and all these other products swarm to because they really knocked it out of the park with this. So we all make apps pretty much every day. And by apps, by web apps, I'm using that pretty generally. If you make even a page internally for your team to look at and see updates of status of something, or you're making through a fully developed, published, millions of hits a day, we're all kind of publishing content and making content and distributing that on the web. So it's dark, I can't see people's hands. Who made an app today or published a new page online today? We've got a couple hands in the last month. See, more than half of you. This is something that we're all doing. Syncing data across clients and devices is hard to make sure that the data is refreshed when it needs to be. It's not static. You've got multiple different devices, maybe consuming your data differently. Your users don't care. This is, your users expect it to be fast, be able to work offline, to go through a tunnel, to step into an elevator, to still be able to interact with it, for it to work on whatever platform that they're bringing to your web app, for there to be some simple authentication. This is 2017, right? It shouldn't be the olden days of a web app anymore. It also shouldn't require managing some complex infrastructure. So having done this, I've been a developer for a decade and a half now. The overhead for me of kind of rolling out a web app and from the full stack of getting a database and a server with some authentication, maybe interacting with an API, and that interacting with the client is not that daunting because I've done it 100 times. But it still is, it's never quite that easy. It's not just one database that you're working with. There's probably a couple other databases. And you're not dealing with one server. You've got a number of different servers that are calling each other. So it's never quite that simple, and neither are the clients. You've got mobile devices, you've got screens, you've got a small laptop screen to a full-size desktop screen. Or as developers, we all have at least 2 monitors. If you don't have 2 monitors as a developer, then you need to talk to your boss, and I'll write a note for you if you need, because it's honestly it's the best thing for productivity. So today we're going to talk about how Firebase can help with kind of dealing with this complexity and hopefully make it easier for you to go from proof of concept to getting something and not having to worry about the full stack, and also then taking it from there and scaling out to whatever you would like. So I've got a couple, I didn't bring, well, here we go. All right, a couple humble examples. So a few years ago, we had at the Dev Fest, we had a treasure hunt app. I'm trying to find this piece. So I have somewhere in my bag, but I'm not going to bother doing this, although it's kind of cool to see. So I am going to bother. So I've got these NFC cards that, these are just some cards that have NFC chips. I'll hang this out. If you have a phone that works with NFC, then you can scan one of those and you can join the treasure hunt. So what I did with these cards basically is I taped them behind posters with different Google products kind of as posters, and you would go around the different event and find them and then scan there's a little endpoint ad or image, and you would scan it. All right, I heard someone. So this whole game was built using as a Firebase web app. All of these NFC cards, all they have is a HTML or HTTP endpoint on them that when your phone opens that up, it asks you to authenticate. So you have to say, sure, I'll go ahead and log in with my Google account. Once you give the app permission to log into your Google account, now we've got, so Kyle just took the lead there. He found 3 endpoints. Now, since this is a demo, what I also did is I using Twilio as a, oh, come on, Mac. No. Okay. Why is it doing this? All right. If you send a text to this number, which, what's it doing? Oh, it's loading all of the slides again. All right. We'll just wait a second. But if you go ahead and send a text to that number, all it is I just have a script running that'll send you a text right back and give you 2 endpoints. So if you don't have NFC on your phone, no, there we go. All right. Everybody's using all of my bandwidth. There we go. So it'll send you just a couple, 2 sample endpoints that you could go to by clicking through an SMS app. All right. So that was kind of cool. Pretty simple. It's not a ton of code. Basically, one JavaScript file with 100 or so lines of code. Then that deals with all of the authentication, all the logging, all of the claiming your leaderboard. If I had this, if my Google Voice wasn't acting up, I would show you what it looked like if I went to the endpoint, what it looked like as a player. I should add that to my slides, but I'm not going to right now. Anyway, another example so this is an example that I rather like. So this is running, this is an internal work project. So I've got, I support at McAllister, I support a database that runs on Oracle. And some users have been saying that it runs really slow at some times during the day, but they couldn't tell me when. So basically what I did is I wrote a simple script that ran an expensive query, a couple, unjoined giant tables, and have it set to run every minute or so. And every minute, then, it runs and logs how long it takes to run that query. When it's done, it just hits an endpoint and sends that out to Firebase. Now, I've had this up and running. So this graph will update in real time as the query executes. I didn't update my script to run every few seconds so we can watch it happen. But it'll happen here in a second. But you can see the whole point of this was to be able to log and see, oh, when was it running slow? So it looks like at about 6 p.m., we had a spike, and this query, which normally takes a couple seconds, took almost 12 and a half seconds. So now I can start to narrow down and say, okay, what else am I running at 6 o'clock? What's happening that might be slowing down other things? Now, of course, Oracle has a ton of administrative tools that you could do all these other logging and digging into what's happening. But the point of this is to say it was almost no work on my end to have to be able to quickly capture data, log it, and view it in real time, and for a single use need. All right, so enough talking about what it can do. Let's go off some sweet jumps here. All right, we're gonna do some live coding, which always works well. So Stephen Fluen and I put together this workshop a few years ago about a year and a bit ago for our group. So you can open this up, and this is always where it will always live at bit.ly GDG TC Firebase. And this is kind of going to walk us through quickly doing setting up a simple website, connecting it to a real-time database, and publishing it out to the web. So we're going to go ahead and start. What is Firebase? So here is this talk that I'm giving you right now. So make that an actual link. All right, so what do you need to run this? Well, basically, as you're doing development, because we're running JavaScript files, you can't run it by opening an HTML file on your local machine. So it needs to be running on a server that's addressable via http:// so anybody on a Mac can run a simple web server. Or if you have your own remote website, that also works great. Well, this will be good. I haven't started my dev system for a while. So basically what we're going to do, all right, clear. All right, I'll make this bigger so you all can see what's happening here. All right, I'm in my home directory. I'm going to go into code, sites, Lloyd Lentz. So I'm just going to go into my personal web server here, and to really go on a limb here, I'm going to make a directory, and this is TC Firebase. That's too much to type. TCFB, is that all right? Because you all I'm going to ask that you follow along with me. All right, so I'm going to cd into TCFB. All right, and touch index.html and touch app.javascript. So now I've created two files, an app.javascript and an index.html. I'm going to start my code editor here in this directory. So I've got here basically an empty file. Uh-oh, that didn't look good. All right, HTML5. All right, so I'm going to start hi and then say hello. Okay, success. So now if we browse out to my new killer web app, Lloyd Lentz /TCFB. All right, we've got my web app is live and it's out on the real world webs. But we're going to make it actually a real. So we're going to say Java. I'm trying to remember my shorthands. Okay. Script. Yep. src equals app.js. All right, so now I've wired up my web app to have here, I'm going to say alert. Hey, Twin Cities. All right, so now I've got my HTML file calling a app file. If I reload this, we get our alert. We've got a full-blown web app. I mean, this thing is choice, let me tell you what. All right. Oh, we're going over here. So that's basically the structure that we need. You need your HTML file and your JavaScript file. Before we go much further, you need to go into the Firebase console and create an app. Now, let's see how well we can do this. So we're going to call this GDG TC demo. I wonder if I can do spaces. GDG TC demo Firebase. All right, we'll create that project. All right, so I've got a new blank project here. I'm going to click on this icon to add Firebase to my web app. And your guest Wi-Fi is pretty awesome. Here we go. All right, we're going to copy this. So this has in it, basically, we're going to import the Firebase library and then define some local variables, which are these, have to do with this database that I just created, and then call that and do the config. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to put that above my app. So I'm going to pull in all the Firebase libraries before I call my app script. This is the bottom of my page, so we'll save that. And now we'll reload my killer web app. And that is still working as we expected. We could do if we want to prove to ourselves that it is there, we now are linking out to Firebase. We've got a fully Firebase-enabled web app. Whew. I mean, well, now let's do something interesting here. Right now, well, this will be interesting. I have a little more time than I normally do, so I'm going to suffer you all through actually doing this from the ground up. Doop. All right, so here we've got to look at the database. The database has nothing in it right now. The Firebase database is a NoSQL data store. Has anybody worked with NoSQL in here? We've got a couple hands, a fair number of hands. So NoSQL basically is that everything is stored as characters, and it is UTF-8 character based, and they're all stored in a JSON. So what that means is we can create an element here, and we'll call this basically everything has a key and a value. So now I added some data to my database with a key and a value. That's kind of uninteresting. What if we say something like messages, and then in here I'm going to add message 1, and add here I'll say username is Lloyd, and message 1 also contains message of hey there, GDG, TC, Firebase, phenoms. All right. So now we've got more stuff happening. We've got more data in our data store. Now this is interesting-ish, but what makes it really cool is if we go to, go, no, all right, copy that. So if I go to this endpoint, GDG demo Firebase.firebase.io, each one of these endpoints are stored as JSON. So if I say .json, it will return, oh, look at that, because they fixed this. Isn't that smart of them? All right. So by default, the rules are. This is why having my pre-baked app makes it go really well. So I'm going to break all the security and say that anybody can read any part of my database and write to any part of my database. So we'll go back here to this endpoint and refresh that. And now anybody could go to this .json endpoint and see, all right, so here is the entire JSON. I have an add-on on my Chrome browser to make JSON a little bit more readable. Here's actually what it looks like. So it's one long string. So we've got one node that's key with the value of value. The first element in messages, so messages is an array. The first element is null. That's weird how that ended up there. But we've got another object with two key value pairs of message and the username with a value. Now the neat thing about this is you can build your web app out to however deep in this data structure that you actually want to consume this information. So if I go up here into the web address and I say, you know what, really what I want to see is I want to see messages.json. And it will just return the messages. If I want to return messages/1, it returns just the value of the data at that level of the database. If I wanted to say messages-1/username, it will return to me the value at that level of the structure in the NoSQL database. So this is pretty cool. At this point, I haven't had to define any table structures. I haven't had to tell it what size or what data types to anticipate. I just put some data in there. Now, granted, I use the back end, but the really cool thing about a NoSQL data store is you can send it data in whatever structure you want. You kind of send it, and it will store it. So that when you ask for it again, it will return whatever you ask for. Which means if you ask for the wrong thing, it'll just return empty. So if I go to username, there's nothing there. But there shouldn't be anything there. All right, so that is a little bit about setting up Firebase. So like I said, break all the rules. You make everything readable and writable. So at our index page, what we're going to do is we're going to add basically, we're going to take away the beautiful app that we've built. Oh, I see. So we're going to create, greeting, yeah. Basically, we're going to put this part into our index. Instead of hello, I'm going to make a div with messages and a form that has as an input username and the message and a button that will send. So I'll save that, and let me also get this annoying JavaScript pop-up out of there. All right, so now we're going to go back to our web app, reload that, and we've got something that starts to look now like an actual web app. What we're building here is a chat window. So we've got a big window there for your messages. We've got our username and message. But we're not seeing any messages, even though we put some in the database, but we haven't told it how to get it yet, or what to do with the data that's in there. So we'll go back to our demo, or our kind of the workshop. All right, so based on how this is, we've got this information. Oh, I see. Right. So let's clean up this initialize script. We don't need that standing out here. We're going to delete that. Okay, and that would live nicely here in the config. So we'll save that, save that. Now we're going to write. We're going to write and read from this database. So we talked a little bit about NoSQL, what the cool thing about that is. Now we need to listen for Firebase data. So what I'm going to do for this first part is I'm going to define some page elements. Basically get the element username and message and the form. I've got my config. I need to be careful here because it's I've changed that all right? And now we're going to define, I'll go over here. All right, the Firebase has this nomenclature of a reference. So we've got a Firebase reference op, which references the node of messages within the database. And then there's a number of hooks that you can kind of hook into that are built into the library of Firebase. And what we're going to pay attention to right now is at this endpoint, messages, anytime a child is added to messages, then execute this callback function. So it's going to run this function expecting data. So when that runs, it's going to create a new div. Add as the inner text in that div, username plus a colon and a space, and then the message. It's going to append that to messages, which is up here, this element here, and then it'll also log to the console so we can kind of see what's happening here. So we'll save that. All right, we'll go back over to our killer web app, reload that, and now we're getting data from the database. If I were to, whoops, what just happened? Oh, I see. All right, so one thing we can do that's pretty cool is we can watch this data here. So now we've told this web app to listen to the database. So anytime data is added, so I'm going to add a new endpoint here to, I'm going to call username, not username F, username other Lloyd, and the message is stop talking to yourself. All right, so I'll add that, and so now we've got more data. We've got the initial message from Lloyd, and then other Lloyd giving him some talk. All right? So now, I don't know if you all noticed that, but that happened about as fast. Let's see. Username, Lloyd, message. All right. So I'm going to click this add button, and we're going to watch and see how long it takes to show up in my app. Now, the important thing here, this page on the left of your screen, this is running on my web server, right? This is lloydlens.com/whatever my app thing. This is using console.firebase.google. This is the Google's back end over here. So this is going out to a satellite somewhere and back down. You know, this is doing a full round trip to their servers. When I click OK, that pops up nearly instantaneously in the other window. This is pretty cool stuff, I think. I mean, we've got almost no code that I've had to write yet. And this is already pretty cool. So let's make it a little bit better so we can see our messages. Now let's also listen for, let's make it so we can post messages to the database. So we'll go back over to our app, our JavaScript app, and we're going to add a listener on the form. So when the submit action happens on that form, we're going to stop it from reloading the page, because that's annoying. And then we're going to log to the console, and then we're going to push to our messages ref, which we defined up here. This is basically our local reference of this endpoint in the database. We're going to push a JSON object. So curly bracket, key value, comma, key value. So I'm going to save that and go over here, right? And we've got now, I'll reload this. Oh, I broke something. What did I break? Aha. I need to fix my spacing, because look, it says right here. There's more code. All right. All right. Message focus. So we'll save that again. Go back here. Reload. Okay, we're getting data. All right, so now I can give myself another username. Innocent bystander. You all are weird. All right. So I hit submit. That went right away. Now you'll see what happened over on the database side. We've still got our console window open. That happened pretty much right away. Neato. Submit. Right? So we're watching over here on the database console, the data getting added and it appearing instantaneously. Aha, see? Good. So you're all welcome to reload the app and try and type in things and see that it is actually posting. You all have access to our real world web app. All right. I shouldn't be so punchy when I start demos. Now, you know, what would be cool, I don't know how people usually do this, but somebody, this being a room full of developers, always gets somehow, people are really smart and they put in emoji. All right, because like I said, it is UTF-8. So it will handle non-ASCII characters as well. Store that in the database. I do wonder what it looks like here on the back end though. Huh, yep. It just rolls that through. So somebody's trying to draw a taco cat or something. Now we've got some, you know, one of the things that as developers you should always be looking out for is, right, could I say, hey, tick, semicolon, drop table users, semicolon, right? Well, you know, it'd be neat if we could do some SQL injection, but unfortunately they've handled all of that and there's nothing, nothing that you could do to break it at this point. All right, so continuing on with our demo.
Can you show the database for the last one?
This last one?
How it protected, yes.
The drop table one? Or
Yes,
the
drop table, yes.
Yep. So here's, it's just considering it text. Yep, single tick. I might put double quote there. Maybe I didn't do. Well, that's interesting. It escaped my single quote because it's JavaScript. Anyway, is it not putting in new lines? Is that what we're hoping for? ASCII. Oh, it's just really long. Anyway, cool. So we will, oops, close that out, leave that up, go back here. All right, so one thing that is a good UX thing to do, at this point now we've got a fair number of messages, but once, you know, we're adding messages here and they're rolling off the bottom. So let's clean that up a little bit and use this built-in Firebase call that on the last 20, so let's retrieve only the last 20 messages that are in the database and show those in our chat window. Because after so much time, you don't want to have to load all of the messages that exist in your chat history. Also, what we're going to do, so that you don't have to manually scroll to the end, is just one other little UX tweak here is scroll to the end of the page. So I'll save that. I'll go back here to my app. I'll reload this page. And now it only shows the last 20 messages. All right, and now if I type in things, you'll see it starts to scroll my div for me. Makes it much nicer and easier to use. So there's a number of other of these kind of special methods that you can use within the Firebase app. So you could do limit to last. You could do, what are some other, I'm blanking on some of these other special methods that help you in your app's performance. So Firebase, it's not any problem for them, for Google's infrastructure, to send you a JSON that is 500 meg slug of ASCII. But your app's performance will suffer with that. So you want to think about that as well. What will it take in JavaScript to run through all of these? So some of these little helpers help your app perform better. So I mean, really, at this point, this is about as cool as it gets. We've got a fully functional web chat app up and running with minimal amounts of code. We've got 46 lines of JavaScript and 20 with extra room. So 17 lines of HTML, and we've got a full-blown web app up and running. Now, I think, because I taught this forever, if you call up the inspector here, and we'll go ahead and reload this page. So one of the things, as a developer, as a web developer, you spend a lot of time with your web inspector console open and in figuring out what's going on, or trying to pay attention to what's going on. Now, you'll notice here we've got our main. So basically, the resources that are requested, we've got the default, the index.html from this endpoint, Twin Cities Firebase. Okay, so that came back with a status of 200. Firebase.js, this is the library, came back with a status of 200. It's not that big. It could be smaller. 100 meg JavaScript file is sizable, but it doesn't change, right? So there may be some expense as that initial page load, but as each additional page load, your app won't request it again. And then our app here, app.js, is just a K. Now, you'll note here, there's this one resource being called with a status of 101, which you should be asking, what's going on? So I'll ask you all, what's going on? Anybody remember what the status code of 101 is? Like, we're all used to 400 errors or 500 errors, right, as developers. What?
What 200 confirm? 200 success?
Yes, right. 200. The status 200 is confirmed. So everything went as expected. 400, like 404, right? This resource you requested it's not found. Sorry. 500 errors are usually an error on the server side. So the script on the server side didn't run correctly. 300 errors, those are often redirects. These are things you should know. 100 was new for me. So a 101 is basically, this is a WebSocket. So the status has been returned as successful, but don't release it. Keep the connection open. So this is what, do I have this too small? There we go. This is the magic of what's happening here within Firebase, that it shows up instantaneously. So it's using WebSockets, HTML5 WebSockets, keeping that connection open. If I add Lloyd talking, so I will post this now to the database, and you saw some frames showed up here. And these are what's happening behind the scenes, kind of the inner gears of the web, of the browser talking to the server, sending the data packets back and forth. All right, so as each of those happen, and also if something happens on the server side that would trigger an update, that would come down through this WebSocket because it's still open, and that triggers an event then within the browser. So I think that's kind of cool, but I live in this stuff, so there we go. All right. So now we've got our full-blown web app running. Not totally secure, right? What we should do is we should add the ability for people to log in and maybe lock down some aspect of it only to people who are logged in. So we're going to go over to the console, the Firebase console, which is over here. Make it a little bit bigger. Go to authentication. All right. For the sign-in method, we're going to enable Google. Whitelist of client IDs. What does that mean? Oh, right. Okay. So over here, I haven't done this in a little while. console.cloud.google.com. So over here, you would create a web app. What project are we using? API project. That sounds great. Project settings. Was that the ID that I needed? No. Service accounts. All right, here's where I start to do a little bit of hand waving and go back to Cledwin. Let's see how we did this. Database, no, authentication, sign-in method. All right, Google. Oh, I see. Web SDK. All right, I'm going to cheat and copy. Paste this, so rather than Cledwin, so that we don't have to, I don't have to change the other background stuff. I'm going to go back to GDG TC demo, authentication, sign-in method, Google. All right, this is the reason I'm doing this. There is a chance. Whoa, what now? Those are different. Save that. Jeff, what's going on here?
So earlier, you picking out which Firebase one, which project.
Yeah?
There's one called Firebase demo.
This one? Well, so this is the cloud project. Where do I, no. Privacy and security? No. Good demo. Here I am. No.
These are not the droids you're looking for.
Oh my goodness. What's going on here? All right, so they changed this console all around. Firebase demo, permissions, right? Editor, no, that's other things. Huh. So from here, what else did I do? Google, database. All right, fine. So I'm going to totally cheat, and I will send these notes elsewhere. So I'm looking at, here is Cledwin, overview. There's authentication. Where's my little linky link? SDK setup, no. Oh, I see. Add another app, web. Okay. I'm going to copy these config settings because I know I've already ham-fisted my way through this other part. All right. All right, so now we'll save this. And now we're going to have data. Sorry, so if we go over here, this is why I thought this would be great. So now we've got data from when I did this demo in Kansas City. So at this point, what I need to make sure that I do is I set back the rules, database rules. Set this back to true. All right, publish those. Didn't like that. Publish those. All right. So now we'll go here and say Lloyd up and running. All right. So this is still the app that we built. So sorry for my live confusion here. This is why live coding is always great. All right. So now this is still the app. We're now connected, rather than to the database that we had created, we're connected to another database with almost the same setup, except for an authentication part, which I will fill in later. Oh, there we go. Put some HTML markup in there, but it's not rendering out as HTML. Actually, storing HTML in Firebase and then getting it to render back, it is not as awesome. Or it is, once you solve it, it's great. But JavaScript doesn't like to inject HTML into a page. There's permissions and weird stuff that ends up happening. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to add some security to our web app. And we're going to do some really high-tech security. Right? We're going to go over to the form. What? Show sidebar. Okay, no. What just happened? View. Show status bar? No, come on. Layout's normal. Worst demo ever. Okay, index. There we go. All right, so we're going to, in this form, what we're going to do is modify the style. So we're going to hide the form and then put another div here which says login with Google after the form. Okay, in the form, all that form had was the username and message. So we go back to our app and reload it. What? I can't see the entry form. You have to click login with Google. So we'll go ahead and do that. But that doesn't do anything because we haven't told it what to do yet. Right, so in our app, what we're going to do is we're going to define a few things. Oh, all right, fine. In our app, we're going to go down to the bottom here and not forget to copy everything because we've learned our lesson. All right, so basically what we've told it here is we've created a variable called provider, which is saying, all right, within Firebase, we're going to use this Google authentication provider. And we're also going to ask for additional scope within that provider to be able to do the login. So then on the login button, what we're doing is now we're going to listen for a click event. When that happens, go ahead and do the Firebase auth with a pop-up. All right, so we're going to save that. So that's updated. We'll go back to our app, reload. Now when I click login with Google, it gives me a pop-up and it says, hey, which Google account do you want to use? I'm going to choose this account. It's going to go through the authentication process, send back to my JavaScript code the success. So on success, then I said on the form, change its display from none to just block. And then the login button, change its display to none. So this is the magic of, this is the high-tech security that we have happening here. Any questions about this authentication process? As web developers, I can't see, yeah.
Can you give it a higher function link so that if you have your own authentication system, other than SHA-1 or something like that, you can refer to that?
Absolutely. So, whoops. So you can use, it's pretty easy out of the box to use Google. You also can use Facebook's OAuth, Twitter, GitHub, generic OAuth endpoint, or you can use email and password. There's also, so there's some of the things that we've done. Anonymous sign-in provider. I haven't looked into the details of what this is.
I mean, if you had another OpenID provider.
Right. So you could do that. You also can build your own, of course, authentication rules.
Is it secure as soon as you enable one of those? You can't read right to the database?
Well, you can. So right now, what all we've done as far as security, and this is actually, as web developers or as any developer, you should care deeply about security. So how do we know this is actually secure? This is, it's kind of the magic of OAuth partly, and one of the things that we've defined here in my settings is that we've said in this database, the only valid redirect sources are localhost, which, in production, we would take that one out. But because the authentication request is coming from lloydlens.com, it's a valid OAuth request. If you all took the code that I've now put up there and tried to have it call the Firebase OAuth request, it would pop up with an error screen and say, yeah, your domain is not authenticated to use this endpoint to validate the users. So that's kind of the beauty of OAuth, is that OAuth says, all right, Google, if you've got a user who's signed in, I trust that you know how to sign people in securely. You tell me they're signed in securely, I got it from here. Same with Facebook, Twitter, etc. But we've got this contract now saying only from my domain to there. All right. Now, your question about the rules of the database. So the database rules are still that anybody can read and write. So all the security I've done as far as authentication is just locked down to my domain. At this point, it's still anybody could log in. So someone, good, I've got a hacksaw amongst us. This always helps in my demo. So somebody didn't log in. Likely they haven't refreshed the page. So they've got an old version of our application on their browser, and they could continue to mess with our data. Oh, really? Nice. Oh, and there's a bunch of other ways, right? So if we open a private browser, right? If you just, you could inspect this and maybe turn on this form, right? So rather than display none, you display whatever you like. So here we've got blarg, right? So I've hacked my own database. This is why, hiding elements on your web page doesn't make it secure. We're all well aware of this. So the next step to actually do this, to make it secure, is to require in the rules of our database, in order to write to it, we're going to say that you have to be authenticated. So the auth token, so there's a couple magic words in this rule set, and saying that the auth is not equal to null. So I'll publish that, and I go back over here and reload this page. I didn't need to. Oh, it logged me out. Oh, that's cool. All right, so I'll go back and log back in. All right, and now I can post. Now, how about Mr. I didn't log in? I'm guessing it's Jeff. No? So, all right, are you still able to post?
After I refresh?
Well, with your Hacksaw?
Oh, I just refreshed.
It's all right. There's room for developers. I expect more people trying to break my demo. All right, so everybody's had to log in. Well, let's see here. If I can, it didn't take that long to hack my own demo. All right, so we'll do the same trick. This form here, we're going to just show it, right? And we've got, all right, blarg is back. All right, so I posted there. Now, this I think is just, this is not published in the docs anywhere, but this is a little bit of shadow ban, because if we go over here, it's actually not showing up for anybody else. But for this user who has hacked in and posted to the database, it shows up like they did, but it's not actually making it to it's not being saved in the database. So that's, I think, is just a kind of a funny demo, happy byproduct. All right, so now, at this point, we could clap our hands, right? Knock the dust off your hands. Now we've got a fully authenticated web app posting chat messages in real time. Almost no code. I'm going to say almost no code. Minimal amount of code. We're almost up to 80 lines of JavaScript. Fair amount of comments. Okay, still at 20 lines of HTML. Now, obviously, this isn't nicely branded. It's not. You could do a lot more to make it make it actually an app that you'd be proud of showing your boss or somebody on an interview. But nice. I think this is about as cool as it gets. But ooh, nice. The real Patrick. Oh, right. I want to know how someone did that. So, but wait, there's more. All right. So here we are in our. I don't know what happened to my. Oh, yeah, fine. Save that. Close that. Oh, I see. It had opened something strange. All right. So here's our folder. Yep, great. using some simple command line tools that are free and easy to install. We're going to do Firebase init. All right, so that's going to install a. So we're going to go ahead and choose hosting. All right, and we're going to use Cledwin. All right, yeah, we'll go ahead and do that. Use as a public directory. Say this, I'll try that, see if that helps. Configure a single page app. No, we're going to not do a single page app. No, we're not going to overwrite our index. All right, so it wrote some stuff to this config file, firebase.json, which is here. So now, I don't know why it added that. That's super helpful. Firebase.json. So, oh good. We'll see if this works. So this is basically saying the public, the distribution version of my app lives in the root directory of this folder. This is still our app that we built. That's a reference file. I haven't seen it make this 404 for me before. That's really interesting. Anyway, Firebase.json. So none of that really adds anything, but we're going to go ahead and do Firebase deploy. All right. So it went ahead, because I've logged in, I've authenticated this console to Firebase in the past. If I were to do it the first time, if I would do Firebase deploy, it would open up one of those OAuth windows for me and tell me which account do I want to authenticate into my console. You choose your account that owns the Firebase project. So now it tells me here we've got, stop it, Mac. All right. If we go out here to cledwin.firebaseapp.com, we've got the same app that we just wrote. We've got and you can tell because the title of the page is high, and it's referencing the same content. We've got Patrick and the real Patrick. Log in with Google is, the process here is still the same. I could pick somebody else. We'll go with Cledwin family and say meaner. All right. That's it. So now you've got a web app fully hosted out on Firebase. I can go back to my initial demo here. You've got a database, we've got authentication, we've got security, we've got hosting. So you've got your full stack for your web app. Now, I did this demo on lloydlens.com, but you could have done that on localhost until you deployed it out to the cledwin.firebaseapp.com. And now you've got hosting. One of the cool things that comes with Firebase is you can actually, for the free version, you get a ton of features and options. You can have a custom domain name on the free level of Firebase. You also get, wow, all right, you get a whole suite of tools, more than just the basic set. So the basic set that I just talked about of a database, authentication, security, hosting, those were kind of the core values that they offered when they first came out. It was their own company, then they were bought by Google, rolled into kind of the Google ecosystem, and a lot of the great product teams have really recognized the true value that Firebase has provided. One is kind of environment, two is just their ethos, or the way they bring products to users, and a lot of other tools are on board. So we've got AdWords, invites, dynamic links, cloud functions. They just released a number of new pieces that they added to Firebase at the last GCP Next. The beauty of this is you can kind of forget the server. It runs on client-side code only. There's native SDKs for HTML5 for developing in iOS and Android. Gives you access to your database, this cloud NoSQL store that we talked about, in the real-time data. So with all the different SDKs, all of those real-time apps are out of the box, all the real-time nature of the Firebase database that we talked about. SDKs, really easy to add them to different environments. It works natively offline. So often what I'll do in my demo here is I will turn off the Wi-Fi and continue to type here. Type B, how do you spell type E? Type E here. All right, so messages are going up. All right, this still looks live to me. I'm able to interact with my app as though the data is available. I'm not connected to the Wi-Fi. When I turn my Wi-Fi back on and am reconnected, the Firebase library will do all the work to figure out how to get the data interleaved and updated in the way that's necessary. Now, one of the things that would happen if other people had been typing and I had also been listening for on delete, it would reshuffle the messages so that they came in order, but we're not going to worry too much about that. So offline out of the box, try and do that in your web app in 20 lines of code. For the native applications, there's extended offline that is a little bit more to think about. Authentication, we talked about having email and password, a number of OAuth providers, or you can also connect it to your custom authentication provider. Security, we showed the very basic level of security, which is basically the entire database, but it can get pretty fine-grained and say, maybe anybody can read, and in the message node, nobody can write. Or you can validate it, you have to require the data exists. Or you could add, only people whose user ID is in another node in the database, auth user ID if the user ID is in this another collection, right? So you can get pretty fancy with the security. Maybe you can only update your own profile information. Well, that's actually just one line in the security that makes that pretty cool. So hosting, of course, this is running on Google's cloud system. So this is pretty darn scalable. This is and robust and available. They've also rolled out versioning, so you could roll back to a previous version through the console. Lots of frameworks are rolling this in. So Angular has a whole Firebase endpoint. Most web and native frameworks have something working. Oh, this is the coolest demo when it's working. But I think they turned off the feed. So what this is somebody did a demo using the San Francisco Metro Transit, or the equivalent of Metro Transit in San Francisco, updating all of the geolocation of all of the transit buses in real time and doing a geographical query in real time on that Firebase data, which is pretty darn cool. So that's out on GitHub. It's fallen out of being updated. But there's just a lot of really neat things you could do with that. The documentation is phenomenal. As really something that I value highly for if you're learning something new, it's how easy is it to onboard. I think really the purpose of this demo is to try and encourage you to think that this is pretty easy to get up and using it. The documentation that's available is great. I think all of the members of the Firebase team really have a heart of a teacher, and it's great. So lots of folks using it. It's in production. There's people using Firebase as their back end. One of the things that I can vouch for, or one of the things that how about this? As a responsible developer, you need to be able to vouch for and validate to your boss or to yourself. Is this something I can rely on? I said I've been to the DevFest in DC. So one of the things in DC, there's lots of government agencies. When I was out there, I talked with the head of IT for a whole government agency, and they've moved their entire data systems into Firebase. And so he said it was work. He had to make a case for it, but he's confident enough to, and I think that's a strong statement. As he was saying, he's mandated by Congress to make sure his data systems are secure. So fortunately, my work is not mandated by Congress, but I think that's a strong argument for its ability to handle production. So that's my talk for tonight. I kind of leaned into taking a little more than an hour, not terribly too much more. Any questions? Patrick.
If you needed to have an Android or an iOS application use the same backend, would Firebase work?
Absolutely. So, right, as I said, the SDK for Android or iOS or web, those are all for the front end. They're all talking to the same back end of Firebase. So as you deploy your app out to the different endpoints or different clients, they're all updating themselves in real time. And so you've built at least one app with Firebase, and it's dreamy, right?
Yeah, it's actually really painless. The first time I used it, there's been a speed bump here and there. Uploading a shell one for authentication something right for an hour or something one time. But it's all pretty good. A lot faster than saying my own guy.
Right? And for the iOS, I never heard how the iOS side of it went.
Yeah, I tried, but it was fine.
Same, it was fine. Right.
Yeah, no problem.
For the database backend, you're using a NoSQL database kind of like MongoDB.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to use a database backend like SQLite3 or MySQL, is there a way to dovetail those?
You would have to find your own provider of that.
So you're saying Firebase doesn't support it?
Nope.
It's a competitor to those, right? Like, use their database and their system,
Right.
or you're using something else hosted somewhere else. That's the problem. It's their data.
Yeah. So it's similar, right? Just like you said, it's most similar to MongoDB in that it's a document data store, a NoSQL document data store. It's not a relational database. So if you wanted a relational database, you could build your app to interface with it, but that's on you. You'd have to figure out how to do that.
The other thing is that the Mongo has training, right? If you've got Mongo, you've got it in one place, and then you have to set up another place and have replication and sharding and all those kind of things. You want to be able to have something to be able to scale. There's steps and work that you have to do to be able to grow. It'll grow as your app grows, and it'll shrink back down to nothing as your app shrinks back. If you're outdated, you don't have to worry about scaling up or scaling down. You only pay for the
Well, the thing is that if you have a legacy database already established, and you're going to have to port everything over to that. And what you haven't showed me here is how do you import things from another database into this NoSQL database, which is not MongoDB.
Can be adventure. Can be adventure.
It's there's actually, so from the data side of things, You could export and import JSON. So you could, if you have an exported data set from another data system. So I have done that from an Oracle database, but you have to write a query to export it into JSON. It will import JSON data and load it into here. Anybody else?
How much it used to be paying?
Oh, like absurd amounts.
Way more.
Firebase pricing. So you can have, so one of the things that it does limit you on is the simultaneous connections. And that is almost equivalent to users. So usually you license products based on users, but this actually is simultaneous connections. So people hitting the database at the same time. And they're actually pretty generous about allowing peaks. So if usage spikes up for a few minutes and then drops off, they're not going to get too worked up about that.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but simultaneous connection, not with the website, just the actual updating the database.
No, it's the WebSocket.
It is.
Yeah. Right. So right now I'm using two, right, because I've got different tabs open. So the database, and they rate that by gigabytes per month. So 10 gigabytes of up-down traffic to your database per month. Storage, now, okay, storage is not the database. There's another feature of storing, so you can actually store blobs, binary objects, in Firebase. So you can store up to 5 gigabytes for free of objects. Those would be pictures, sound files, movie files, those sorts of things. Where else did we get to? Platform. Yeah, it comes, included free are analytics, cloud. It doesn't, it's a little bit different of what I'm used to, but it's pretty generous. And then, $25 per month for basically taking the cap off of that. Any other questions? Yeah?
Yeah. Kind of coming from my background, but everything, what you're basically telling me is default, this thing is leaky as a SIP.
Sorry?
Defaultly, it's leaky as a SIP. You have to implement your own security.
Yeah?
Is there any configuration for Firebase where default it will meet security guidelines for specific clients or certain clients?
I don't, by default?
Security says,
Yeah, I don't know. Those are great questions. We're 10 after 8. I think we're scheduled to go to 8. I'm happy to hang out and answer questions. Thanks, everybody, for coming tonight. Be sure and watch for the announcement for the meetup next month. Talk to us about what you'd like to present on. Boy, we'd love to hear from somebody. Oh, fill out the survey. Bit.ly, GDG survey, TC. Thanks, everybody.